Thanks, Scott. As Scott said, Wes Porter, I'm an Extension Precision Ag and Irrigation Specialist. I've been here just over 2 years, so I guess my second time at this meeting talking about some of the work I'm doing. And so in peanuts up till now, a lot of my focus has been looking on what can we do to better manage our irrigation there. You know, what are some of the options out there? There are a lot of tools, a lot of scheduling, sensors, online scheduling tools, et cetera, et cetera. So where do we need to look and what do we need to do to kind of do that to help? And my goal is to maximize yields and kind of reduce inputs so that we can increase profitability. And I guess that comes from the precision ag side. I am an ag engineer by training, so. What is irrigation scheduling? So I kind of broke it out into a couple of things. It's just a technique that involves determining how much water is needed and when do we apply it to the field to meet those crop demands. So if we want to break that up, what's the purpose of scheduling irrigation? We can just say, all right, we're going to run the pivot a couple of times a week or as often as we can get to it. But if we can do better than that, the main purpose, so we can increase the profitability and or quality. So in a lot of cases, our irrigation timing does have an effect on the quality of crop too. By increasing the efficiency of using the water or energy, or by increasing crop productivity. So that means getting to a crop at a proper time. We manage the soil water status more correctly. That means that we're going to allow water to be applied at specific times to meet the crop demands, but we also want to minimize water loss due to runoff, deep percolation, etc. So we'll go through some options for that. So if you're considering irrigation, if you don't have it, I know a lot of us, we're probably 50% irrigated on our peanut land here, and if you're looking at putting it in, or if you're looking at even scheduling, I just put up a few points that we should consider if we're getting ready to schedule. So what do we want to look at? Our irrigation type is number one. So what's the efficiency of that system? And that's going to range somewhere from 60 to 95%. That depends. Your 60% range is going to either be solid set systems, traveling gun systems, some of our older systems that have the high pressure impacts on top. So what that means is 60% of that water we think we're pumping, or if we put that thing on an inch, 60% of that is getting down to the crop. So we're only actually applying 6/10 to the crop. Keep that in mind. Our newer systems, if we're looking at either drip or we're looking at newer systems with drops, low pressure, all that, claim between 90 and 95%. If you talk to a lot of the companies, they'll say they can get up to 95% efficient. That's really high, if you ask me, but that's, really good. So it all comes back to management too. Soil water holding capacity. So typical range in this region of Georgia, kind of South Georgia, coastal plains, that ranges from 0.6 to 1.8 inches per foot. So that means for every foot of rooting depth, you can hold, for example, 1 inch of water, wherever your soil fall in there. Crop growth stage, how much do we need at that potential stage? If you can, utilize sensors or some other tool to kind of better manage that irrigation. That's what we look at. You can kind of get more precise estimation what's in our soil and what we need. And then also critical, if we can apply those rates weekly instead of applying it in one big amount, that usually is a lot more effective and a lot more efficient. So water requirements for peanuts. This is in the peanut production guide, so those of you producers out there that get these at your county production meetings, and like some of the other specialists said, I'll be at a lot of the production meetings and we can go, this is an abbreviated talk of course, we'll go deeper into it at those. But they're required, we're saying around 23 inches of water in that production guide. I'm getting a little skeptical of that, thinking we might want to reduce that a little bit from some of the stuff we're starting to see. But what I'm not skeptical about is that middle part right there. About 18 of the 23 inches, or a majority of your water is needed from weeks 10 to 17 of a 20-week growing season. So you can kind of see this here. This is in the production guide too. So easy to see, but we've just got a very short 7-week window of a 20-week growing period that we're really needing a lot of that water that is really critical. So keep that in mind. So how do we typically schedule irrigation in Georgia? And I know it's debatable. This is a USDA survey. We can talk about the results all we want, or where they come from, or not, or who answers them and how they answer, but it's the best information we got out there. So my kind of plea is we're looking at getting an irrigation survey for Georgia together sometime soon, if I can never sit down in the office long enough to do it. But if they get sent to you, answer it, because we just need to know this information and know where to focus the efforts. But from the national survey, Georgia ranked at about 88% on visible stress, so that's too high in my opinion. That means we're waiting until we see crops wilting out there. We're kind of hurting ourselves when we get there. 40% fill of the soil, 9% on the soil moisture sensor. So that's fairly on the low end, and my bet is most of the guys that are using soil moisture sensors are using some sort of, using a consultant there, because I know a lot of consultants that do a lot of soil moisture sensor work in the state. A scheduling service, 7%, so maybe that's an online scheduling tool, Irrigator Pro, UF Peanut Farm, something like that. 7% on weather report, 12% on a calendar schedule, so they just kind of hash it out and say, this is what I've got to get done when, and we're running these systems on these days. And then 2%, which is good. I'm glad it's down to 2 and not much higher on when their neighbors irrigate, because that's the worst strategy I think you can follow. I think it's put on there as a joke, I would hope. So let's get into some data. Let's talk about what it really means and what we need to look at. So I've got 2 years I'm going to show you here. 2014, I had 6 treatments, five actual treatments, and then a rain-fed or dry land. So we looked at a soil moisture sensor, that UGA SSA. It's a soil moisture sensor using watermark sensors. Smart Crop, which is a canopy temperature sensor. UGA checkbook method. UGA Easy Pan, UF Peanut Farm, and then rain-fed. And so you kind of see that's a Smart Crop. If you're not familiar with those, they're just reading infrared canopy temperature. This is UGA SSA. It's not the best picture, but you can just kind of see it there. And we were doing some data logging, looking at some of John Deere's water management system there too. So 2014, I'm going to call it a more dry year. We didn't get but about 12 inches of rainfall distributed across that year. It was very wet early, and that caused some problems in itself. But throughout the season, we didn't get a whole lot of rainfall. And that kind of tells the story in our dry land here. We're looking at under 500 pounds of yield, and those are really late in the season. We really were unable to put any peanuts on most of our dry land, if y'all remember, during 2014. So we look at using some sensors or using some tools, even in a dry year. We've got the sensor there, and in the sensor it recommended just under 10 inches of water, so totaled up to about 22 inches, which is right at that level we're recommended in the production guide, which is fine. We were able to pull out about 6,000 pounds of yield, which is just fine. We look at the canopy temperature sensor, and I did some playing around with that, more data logging than anything, but I like to throw it up there a little bit lower, around 18, 19 inches of water. That did reduce my yield some, down to about 5,600 pounds. Easy Pan, around 12 inches of irrigation required. That pushed us up to about 24 inches of water total on those peanuts. 5,700 pounds. So then we go to the UGA ET checkbook, 15 inches of water. And this is what made me start looking at maybe we need to start adjusting this checkbook, and maybe we are over applying, maybe we're missing timing, maybe it's something else there. But we look at 15 inches of water, 27 total inches that year, 27 and a half. And I see a reduction in yield from a lot of my other methods. So I'm down about 1,000 pounds from a sensor-based method, down about 600, 700 pounds from some of my other scheduling methods that are kind of in the field helping truth some of the stuff going on. And then on the peanut farm, UF Peanut Farm, I'm going to explain what happened there. It missed 2 events from my sensors, and it just happened that those 2 events, just poor timed, well-timed, poor time, whatever you want to say, rainfall, and then kind of falling in with the model. So if you wanted to look at individual varieties, we could talk about that for a minute. How did they perform? Believe it or not, in a dry year, we saw a big difference in varieties, and we saw that the sensor-based method was the best. That's what it comes back to, pretty much. Our 06Gs out-yielded everything by a few hundred pounds in that case with about 6,600. Next in line was the 12Ys with about 5,800. Not next, excuse me. Tough Runner 511 was next in line with 62. Then the 12Ys, then we had Tough Runner 727. It was just kind of odd to me that the sensor was the best method in 2014 in what I would call a more dry year. Now let's go back and look at timing. So let's not just say amount's not the most critical thing either. Timing is also critical, so when we get it on that crop. So all this is, if you look at the bottom of that graph, that's just our rainfall schedule. And you know what, we started off relatively wet early, and then we look it up here, what these are, we triggered 3/4 inch events, but basically just imagine this is just the day that it got the irrigation. Don't worry about the total amount at this point. And so if I look early in the season, right here, I'm getting pretty ample rainfall, so none of my methods here triggered. I move into here, and I'll ask the question, when we're dry, we've been dry for over a week or more, and you get a 1/4 inch rainfall, does that really do anything for you? That basically does nothing. We're lucky if it really settles the dust. We're not really able to infiltrate any of that at all. So what I think happened with peanut farming this year, just the way the model's set up and we're looking at it, we've looked at refining that a little bit. We've got 2 big events back to back that kind of added to that soil water balance here, and then a small event. So we add all that in. Well, it skips this event here that where a sensor we said we needed to trigger, and with the checkbook we didn't get any in that time. And then we get a bunch of these compounding 1/4 inch rainfalls that add up to close to an inch. A week or so later, it triggers, but then it says it has enough to wait another week or so before it needs to trigger again. Guess what? My sensor called for another trigger point there. So it missed these 2 events pretty much early. After that, it matched up fairly well with my sensor, throughout the rest of the year. So it just happened that it was just those rains that really didn't help us a whole lot got added into, and so we canceled an irrigation based on that. And then you just got a poor irrigation manager right here. When I was running the trial, I triggered an irrigation, then it rains 3 inches a day after. That's what always happens, right? So 2015, I wanted to pull a little deeper into some of this stuff and see, look at some more methods, reevaluate some of the ones I'd already looked at. So you see the SSA again, stepped a little bit farther with the smart crop. We pulled in what's called a crop water stress index. So that's just running the canopy temperature and vapor pressure deficit through an equation, setting a threshold and determining when those crops need it instead of just looking at canopy temperature. Checkbook again, I said, all right, let's look at half the reduced checkbook and see if that's maybe where we start to go, or we need to go 3/4, somewhere in there. I'm just looking at reducing that a little bit. Easy Pan, Peanut Farm, and then I'm going to try out Irrigator Pro this year in rain-fed dry land. So let's look at it here. It was a wet year. This is what I'm going to call a wet year. We're at our peanut requirement, what we say in our production guide, 23 inches of water. So I see very little to no difference here. What I do want to point out, the biggest difference I see, like I said, no difference in yield, no statistical difference. We do see our highest yielder was Irrigator Pro with only 2.8 or two irrigation events in that year. We're wasting water here. We're wasting water and we're wasting money. And I've got those numbers in a second, but this is what we have to watch for. We don't want to over irrigate in a wet year. It may not reduce yields, but it may just cost us money from pumping that water. So if we wanted to look at timing, as Bob said, we had some periods of good ample rainfall, and then we had some periods of drought in here. So overall, we can match these up fairly well. We had just enough rainfall to carry us through on about everything we did, so it didn't matter. Again, I think we're just over applying here with the checkbook. The rest of them, you can see they're a lot more sporadic throughout, and then the 50% checkbook, we do trigger often, but we've cut this amount in half. So you look with the sensor, we only applied 5 times during the year, and like I said, with Irrigator Pro up here, we applied 4 applications. So keep that in mind. Again, it was kind of a toss-up on which one, was kind of the best based on varieties. We had 06G right there at about 6,000. We had 12 watt about 6,000 with a sensor. We had Tough Runner 511 at 6,200 using Irrigator Pro. Came out very well, very little water. And then the checkbook in this case on Tough Runner 727. So either way, whatever how you want to look into that. Really quickly, if you wanted to look into, I did do some tillage effect stuff. Very little to no difference. We are seeing, for some reason, slight reductions in yield for when we're doing strip tillage versus conventional tillage, at least at the research site. Kind of baffled me a little bit, and I also saw something in my corn data. I actually used a little more water in my strip tillage this past year than I did in my conventional tillage, so I'm investigating that a little farther. Kind of baffled me that, I thought the opposite of that. So, I want to say a sensor-based method produced the most consistent and highest yield in all varieties during a drier year. So that's just kind of helping us get that timing. I think that's what's critical. When we have that dry soil, we just kind of keep that optimal soil moisture level and hit that timing correctly every time. Irrigator Pro, UF Peanut Farm, so basically systems you can put out there for little to no investment on your end, perform really well during 2015. I think they have potential to guide the producers much better than the checkbook, because what they're doing is they're pulling in live data. We're looking at actual field conditions or actual weather conditions for a particular year, so that we're not using historical ET. Irrigated years were not as high during a wet year. We saw that. Maybe it was some of the white mold problems Bob was talking about. Maybe it was what I saw in the previous year. If you over-irrigate or put too much water on them at the wrong times, you kind of cap those yields. And I'm going to say, looking at this, I want to look at reducing that checkbook. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. If you're getting rainfall, maybe don't follow it to a T. So with this, authors and research, I'd like to kind of acknowledge the staff at the research park, Irrigation Research Park, for helping, John Polk for planting and helping with harvest and some of the other stuff with it. Of course, the Georgia Seed Development Commission, they provide our seeds for a lot of the stuff we do here at University of Georgia. And then the Georgia Peanut Commission and National Peanut Board for funding the project.